Alan Wheeler on my YouTube channel, where I've been talking about spirituality and the tarot, most recently making a playlist called Morrigan Moments. And I spent some time again today invoking the presence of the Morrigan, and I brought out her statue here, lit a candle and some incense, and spent some time in meditation. And again, my disclaimer is some may perceive what I'm doing as strange, but if you're coming from a naturalistic mindset, you might consider what I call personified deity a reflection of the self or the personality. Jungian archetypes. If you are a Buddhist, you may consider these aspects of the Brahman or divine Om. A Christian might see faces of the Holy Spirit, and so on. So practically speaking, I've been reaching a mystical state and trying some practices that are off the beaten road for some. My question today is even further down the road of strangeness for some people, and I'm calling the video something like my Morrigan origin story. And watching some videos by Jesse Huntenberg, I came across the idea that we can look back into our path, our lives, and see where the Morrigan has been apparent beyond the point of feeling the calling that some feel. And in my case, it was about a 5-month period, enumerated or explained in other videos. So as an exercise, earlier today, I did reach a meditative trance state, and I wrote down some of the things that came to mind. I drew a rune, an Ogham stick, and 3 cards from Tarot of Vampires. And the cards coincided exactly with my bullet point list that I came up with in my trance state, and I'll share those in just a minute. By way of introduction, some years ago, perhaps the tarot deck that I bonded with the most intensely was Tarot of Vampires, from which I drew the cards for today. And I had visceral path-working experiences with this character here, which is the Empress from the Empress card in this deck. And as in other decks, and as exemplified by the symbol around her neck, the Empress is associated with Venus. And so for a long time, I worked with the deck and worked with the Empress as with deity. And I recently came to have the mind, and this also came about through another kind of trance visual or trance journey that I had, that the dark goddess is reflected in Venus, who I assume is a lighter goddess, the goddess of love, and vice versa, that they reflect each other. And I had in the scene, in my mind's eye, I saw the hag-like witch begin reflecting the beauty of Aphrodite in a cave. And the magic and the wisdom of the crone were reflected in Aphrodite. This this just ties in that the dark goddess was, if not obviously through the dark imagery of the vampiress in the deck and just the imagery of the deck, conceptually as well. And in the Oham sticks, the blackthorn, pictured here, this is from the Celtic tree oracle. The blackthorn tree um, is associated with the dark goddess. And Quirt, the apple tree, is associated with love. But if you cut the apple in half and look at the cross section, there are 5 sectional seeds that you will see, and it forms a star, um, which kind of bears up the reflection of the um, dark goddess within the light goddess. And the blossoms on the blackthorn tree also reflect the beauty of the lighter goddess and the darker. So that's a little bit convoluted, but all of that to say by way of introduction that for some years now, actually, I may have been bonding with the Morrigan, unbeknownst to myself. And also through working with Odin and battling gout and some other adversities, some other things, leads me to, in more recent years, to see that this may have been a longer process than the 5 months I identified initially. Let's look at the rune, the Ohem stick, and the 3 cards that I drew. And I'll give my interpretation according to this question of my origin story with the Morrigan. And the rune that I drew is Raidho, which can mean ride, as riding on a kind of a chariot on a path or road. And it speaks to me that it is a process. It is a road, and I can look back and see milestones throughout my life, actually, that make this new step authentic, like coming home and resonating with me. The Ohem stick, on the other hand, is the birch, Baith, and it means new beginning. So, although it's a familiar long path, this is a new step in the journey. So this is kind of the frame for my draw that I just drew today, moments ago. The first card I drew from Tarot of Vampires was the Queen of Skulls. Now this, to me, this is Mother Earth, and in this deck, there's a waterfall underground, so you see the earth element, the roots growing around her, and you get the water and earth, the 2 feminine elements. So one of the cards that has maybe the most feminine energy, but also Mother Earth. And so, aside from the Owen, um, I've and the Celtic tree oracle, um, I've associated the Morrigan with trees. And so, thinking back uh, in my life, I've always been drawn to trees. I've made pictures of trees all my life. One of the only pictures that I draw or doodle. And I lived near woods as a child, lots of trees in the yard, playing all day um, out in kind of a wilderness um, close to our house. Um, my wife was drawn to go to China to teach um, by reading the words of a prophecy about trees and about mercy. And so these are some of the um, obvious things looking back. Also, um, about the feminine energy in this card, aside from the Mother Earth and the tree aspect. I've always had sisters. I've always had lots of women as friends and co-workers, and in other words, I've not been a man's man, and I've been able to relate to women um, and communicate well throughout my life in the friend zone, as they say. And this also, uh, to me, uh, explains my affinity for goddess worship and hence um, the Morrigan. The next card I drew was the Ace of Scepters. And this would be the Ace of Wands in other decks, but it speaks to me of that spark, that drive that's always been there. Um, and in the list that I made after the trance journey today, um, I had already noted that I've always identified um, as an outsider and with those that are marginalized. So in high school, when there were foreign students, um, whether from China or England or wherever, I was always the one that befriended them. Um, I was often on the fringe or the outside of the social groups in in my school years, in high school and college, and um, was myself an outlier, and related well with other outliers, even to the point of going to China to teach English fairly comfortably, um, being called La Wai, an outsider, all my days there, my 10 years there. Of course, I teach not only ESL, but I've taught adult ed and developmental students and students who are not traditional. And so there's a lot of helping students to overcome and other things that I find as I do research that are associated with the Morrigan. And this is just a drive, a call that's always been in my heart. The last card I drew was the Star, and it speaks to me of faith, of being led through darkness when we don't always see clearly. And so the meaning of this card is similar to other decks. And this corresponded on my list to just overcoming things, overcoming adversity, having various battles in my own life. And so, um, As a child, I survived 3 divorces that parents went through before I was 18. Um, there were 2 times that my mother had opportunity to kind of abandon us uh, when we were young. And I had battles with uh, alcohol. I'm overcoming that at about 30 years old. And uh, faith kind of won out over self destruction at that time. And I was able to follow that follow that path. And then more recently, um, the battle with gout that lasted about 5 months, and then led in turn into the 5-month calling period that I've described elsewhere. So I'm going to stop here, but this was quite a lot of synchronicity to have the cards that I drew randomly follow the list that I had made just moments before. Thank you for watching, and I hope you feel connection. As always, I hope you feel connection with people in your life, in online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that might be. Take care.